All right, 9:38, the Manny Munoz Show rolling along here for a Wednesday morning. We will close out this hour with a story about a mass shooting that got a ton of attention when it happened, understandably. But the why it happened was the focus of a lot of conspiracy theorists. Well, now we've got an answer, and the story has kind of gone under the radar with everything else going on. I'll tell you about it at 9:48. But before we get to that, love the way this story was presented, was pitched. The movie Rain Man was released in 1988. Great movie, right? At the time, few Americans had ever heard about autism. And about 1 in 10,000 kids at the time were being diagnosed with the disorder. In the, 37 years since then, a lot has changed. And the newest release figures show that now 1 in 31 kids are diagnosed with some level of autism. Jaw-dropping, right? Let's talk about it as we bring in our friend ABC News correspondent Jim Ryan. You can follow him on X at JimRyanTX. Buenos dias, Jim.
That's all. Yeah, 1 in 31 is the latest statistic. 5 years ago, that number was 1 in 36. Now, does this mean that 1 in 10? It could have been 1 in 31 all those years ago, right, when people were saying 1 in 10,000, but it just wasn't really as widely recognized. I think, Rain Man was kind of a turning point in that whole discussion about autism. Dustin Hoffman played it beautifully. If you've ever met anybody who has his degree of autism, he acts very much like a person who has autism. But yeah, the diagnosis has gotten better. The screening processes have gotten better. Physicians, especially family physicians, have gotten better at recognizing autism. And you put it all together, and you have this new statistic: 1 in 31 kids most likely has autism.
And I imagine, since we know more about it now, there's been so much research, what we call the spectrum is much greater than it might have been 4 decades ago.
Well, it's more refined, certainly. 4 decades ago, it's likely that people who had other disorders, learning disabilities or emotional disorders, were lumped in with autism when they didn't have autism, or that people who were autistic were diagnosed with something else altogether. So it's become a more refined process of diagnosing and then categorizing autism on that big, broad spectrum.
So awareness is at an all-time high, understandably, even more so because now we've got Robert F. Kennedy Jr., the Health and Human Services Secretary, talking about an epidemic of autism in unprecedented levels in our history, but he's attributing it to different things, not the fact that doctors now have better tools to diagnose these things.
Well, that's true. And in the past, and he may have backed down from this just a bit. And in fact, in his latest press conferences and public appearances, he has sort of moved away from the simple assertion that vaccines are behind every case of autism or that it's largely behind that. Instead, he's approaching it from a different direction and saying that he wants to get to the bottom of the cause of autism, regardless of what it is, whether it's environmental, whether it's a genetic component there. He says he wants to determine what it is. Now, he's hoping to have this document by September that lays out the cause. Yeah. Researchers have been working on this for decades, and so far without much luck.
We do see, I think boys are, 3 times more likely than girls to be diagnosed, and I think it's more common among Black and Hispanic kids than white kids. I was surprised by that.
It is, yeah. Asian, Pacific Islander kids, Black, African American, and American Indian, those folks are more likely, and boys, to be autistic. Why? Who knows? That's one of the answers that scientists have been looking for a long time. Why is it primarily, or why are the majority of cases in boys as opposed to girls? Hard to say.
Yeah, and researchers, as you kind of alluded to it, there's not a single smoking gun as to what causes autism, but we do know it does not have anything to do with the MMR vaccine.
Correct, and that's what researchers have said. They say that vaccines for COVID, for MMR, for whatever it might be, have not been linked definitively by scientists to autism. You see conflicting stuff about that on the internet, but the primary source of that was back in the 1990s. A physician who made that connection was later debunked, and in fact himself said, this wasn't a good study. So Yeah, you can kind of throw that out, but it's still a part of the public discussion there.
Bobby Kennedy Jr. and his claims, his promises aside, how far? Obviously, we've come a long way in terms of diagnosis at earlier ages and treatments. How far are we from learning exactly what causes it?
Well, sure, it first came to light in the 60s and 70s, but it's probably been around forever, right? For as long as people have been around, autism has probably been around too. So we're still kind of in our infancy in determining exactly what's behind this. We haven't found a cure for cancer. We don't have a cure for other illnesses or disorders. We might still be some ways off. It's pretty ambitious to say that we'll know what causes autism before September.
Yeah, and it's a wise man just reminded me that there are parents out there who believe that their child is on the spectrum at some level, but refuse to get them tested because of the stigma of being associated with having autism.
Well, I think you're right, and that's a shame. I'll tell you, Manny, my brother, who is approaching 70 years old now, was diagnosed as autistic along with other things back in the 1960s.
Yeah.
He's married, he's employed, he has a good life, he's happy, and living independently. So I hope parents, take that. Autism certainly isn't a life-changing or life-ending event, but it does alter the way that people maneuver in the world.
And some of us are just antisocial. We don't like people, so that's why we tend to stay away from crowds and other people. Jim, always appreciate your time, my friend. Thanks so much.
See you, Manny.
That's ABC News correspondent Jim Ryan. You can follow him on X at Jim Ryan TX. Look, I know people that forever we've said he's a little bit different, and not necessarily thinking, well, they must be autistic, just different, socially awkward. Maybe they are uncomfortable in social situations, or they're more shy and things like that. Are they on the spectrum? I don't know. Maybe, but I mean, does it really matter at that point when you're functioning perfectly and everything else that has to do with life? I guess maybe if you could receive some sort of treatment or something like that, it would make sense. But I completely understand not wanting to be associated with the stigma because, like so much other stuff that has to do, this isn't a mental illness per se, but there is a stigma surrounding it. And we as a society haven't learned to embrace that you can control those things. So anyway, wondering if you have stories like that in your life or somebody that you know. Heck, I just don't like crowds. I don't like being around people unless, of course, it's a really good concert or a sporting event. And I do a lot less of that the older I get. But it doesn't mean I'm on the spectrum. Or maybe I am. Coming up next, we'll talk about that story. Mass shooting got a ton of attention when it happened and a ton of conspiracy theories. Well, now we've got some answers, but it's kind of gone under the radar. I'll tell you about it next. But it's no secret. We're just talking about detection, right? And diagnosis. Early detection is the key to surviving everything from cancer to heart disease. So I'm wondering why you wouldn't jump at the chance to potentially save your own life, or at least get a little peace of mind about your long-term health. Yes, I'm talking about taking advantage of the offer of a free heart scan with my friends at Life Imaging FLA. Got my new one scheduled already. I've been doing it for 5 years since they opened their door. Not only do I go every year, once a year, my wife does as well. I encourage my family to do it, to take advantage of the free heart scan. Duh, it's free. Just a few minimum requirements. I get the full body cancer screening because, one, I've got a family history of cancers and heart disease, and two, I've got young kids. I want to be around, if I'm lucky enough, in 20, 30, 40 years to see them graduate from high school and college and maybe get married and have kids. And this really gives you peace of mind about your long-term health. So that's you. If you want that, pick up your mobile phone right now, dial #250. Just say the keyword free heart.